Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Sally Embry. I'm the field CTO for healthcare here at DataRobot. And today I am with Kathleen from Intersystems, and we're going to be talking about healthcare staffing solutions using technology and machine learning. We are so excited to be here today. I'm always very excited to chat with folks. If people could please get the conversation started, I'd love to know where folks are from. So if you could please just leave that message in our chat. It'd be great to know where you're tuning in from, and hopefully we'll be able to tailor some of our conversation point where you are. So it relates back to you as well. So overall, I already introduced myself, but I'm with DataRobot. DataRobot is an end-to-end machine learning platform, everything from data prep, auto machine learning, and managing those models as well as part of our ML Ops platform. We are going to be talking a little bit about how machine learning can integrate into your overall healthcare prospects, but I want to make sure I introduce Kathleen. Kathleen, can you take a second to tell everyone who you are?
Sure. I'm Kathleen Aller. I am the head of global market strategy for healthcare at Intersystems. Intersystems is a software vendor who our Iris data platform is at the heart of more than 1 billion health records around the world, as well as our EMR track care, which is sold outside the US, and our health share longitudinal care records. So I'm thrilled to be here and continue the conversation we started last week at HIMSS.
Yeah, so Kathleen and I have been speaking for probably about a year on Zoom. I think that's probably about right. Maybe a little short of that. And we finally got to meet each other in person last week at HIMSS, which was really lovely. It was so great to see so many people kind of out and about in person live. Out of curiosity, Kathleen, what are some of your HIMSS takeaways? What did you like about HIMSS 2022?
Oh, there was so much to like. Mostly just being able to talk to people in person was wonderful. But in terms of themes that I heard, one of them was AI and interoperability. And the way both of them are important to healthcare. I heard a lot about using technology more as a co-pilot than to replace humans, and I really like that. So I hope that you can kind of comment on that. And the other thing I heard is just how critical it is that as we create new technology solutions, that they're embedded into workflows, that they're essentially invisible. One of the speakers from AWS mentioned making AI and ML boring because they were just there in the background. And I kind of like that idea.
I can understand that. There was a lot of really good conversations I noticed around how to build trust into your machine learning practices, which I'm sure we'll talk more about. And like, just healthcare has been on the slower side to adopt to some degree, but at the same time, I just see this like rapid uptake. Just even going from HIMSS 2021 to 2022, the people coming to our booth were asking about ML use cases. They were already like in a place where they knew that they needed some structure around their data, which just completely different conversations than I was having in 2021. So pretty excited about what we saw. And we did a lot of fun demos at our booth as well around hospital readmissions, that trust and explainability piece, as well as staffing and churn. So was really excited to kind of talk about those things a little bit more with the folks at HIMSS.
I saw a lot of booths at HIMSS that were focused around streamlining processes around digital transformation to address staffing concerns. The AHA has put out some numbers that indicate that staffing turnover in hospitals during the pandemic went from 18 to 30% in the US. That's a huge jump in turnover. They're looking at a chronic shortage of healthcare workers of about 3.2 million people in the US by 2026. And one estimate is that staffing costs have gone up 24 billion a year due to needing to use overtime, needing to use contract providers. That's a huge problem to solve in healthcare. So I know you've been doing some work around it. Can you talk about it?
Yeah, I can talk to some of the use cases that we have been working on from the staffing perspective. So there's a couple different angles that we have taken it from. So in terms of what our clients are building with the models that our clients are building with DataRobot, I think the most direct example that we've had is just figuring out employee churn, building models around which employee is likely to depart the organization in the next 3 months and in the next 6 months. We've had a client we have a couple clients working on this use case, but one in particular who basically took in a bunch of HR data, vacation time, performance reviews, as well as hours worked, and kind of number of overtime hours that they had, really just trying to look at that entire employee's history. And they built a model around how to predict pretty accurately when a nurse in particular was likely to leave the org. And then they worked with the HR to kind of identify what interventions were possible. And they did some back of the envelope calculations around, what would it cost to intervene for that employee versus what does it cost to actually bring in a new nurse and train or bring in supplemental staff while that person is out. And it was something on the order of about an intervention was, $1,000, $2,000, but losing that employee was $40,000 to $50,000. So big ROI by being able to identify these employees early and identify what they're missing in terms of what they want out of their career, and being able to talk to them and give them what they need in order for them to not leave. So that's probably the most direct, just kind of figuring out who these people are and intervening early. But we've also done models around staffing optimization and patient flow. So if you can ensure that a patient is going to get the best care possible, but like you can be more efficient with how they're being moved around the hospital, and you can then combine that with the ability to understand staffing optimization. How do you make sure that there's no idle hands on the floor, but at the same time people aren't overwhelmed? Then you can shave off just even small percentages of the number of staffing hours that are needed, and that equates to millions of dollars of potential savings. And it's a win-win for everybody. The patient's still getting great care. We're not putting overtime hours on already very stressed out healthcare workers. And the company is ultimately saving money by not having that staff sitting on the floor, or knowing that the staff that's on the floor is working in the most efficient fashion. So those are just some of the examples we've seen.
We haven't been able to keep up with optimal staffing ratios in the recent months. So that idea of being able maybe to shave off time from one side so that you can, in fact, have that appropriate ratio in the right place, that to me is fabulous.
Yeah. And there's a lot that else that can feed into that. Even things like no-show models and predicting which patient is likely to not turn up doesn't immediately relate back to building a staffing model, but it allows you to kind of appropriately understand how many people you want on the floor that day, or if that very expensive specialist needs to come in. So I think there's a lot of, I hate the word synergy, but synergy between these use cases.
That's huge. But I love the idea that you're making things more efficient. I love the idea we can get more care on the floor by having the right staffing model. But when I talk to people about AI in healthcare, when I talk to them about what they want to apply machine learning to, they're usually bringing up things like sepsis. How are we going to identify patients who are decompensating? They want to solve big clinical complex problems. And they're really excited about it. And that's what a lot of the hype is when you read news stories about AI is coming to change healthcare. We're going to do this and that and the other. Why are you doing things like staffing? Why aren't you doing, or maybe you're doing both? When you work with an organization, how do you help them choose which problems to solve?
Yeah. I think we were both in a session at HIMSS. We had this AI ML pre-session. That was the first time Kathleen and I got to meet. And somebody there said, I always get like a sepsis model. Like that's the thing that everyone's always trying to sell me as a sepsis model. And like I treat sepsis all day. Like I don't really need a sepsis model, or if it's going to be a sepsis model, it's got to be really, 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 really good. And so, we do have clients that are building models for sepsis, but generally like what we like to do, how we like to work with our clients, kind of figure out where they are on their AI maturity curve. So if they're very advanced users, that's very different than being folks that are just kind of dipping a toe in for the first time. And for those that are kind of dipping a toe in the first time, there's a couple things that you want to consider. Like, how is your data organized? How do people want to use this model within their business processes? Are people going to trust the outputs of the model once it's built? So if you're just starting out, if you're kind of early on in your AI ML process, then I usually think it's better to start with things like staffing or operational based models that don't require a ton of PHI, don't require convincing a clinician that AI isn't going to steal their job. Usually just kind of seeing where you are, kind of starting off slow, basically figuring out the most high value but high feasible use cases, and then moving towards more advanced use cases, clinical use cases, point of care use cases. I'd be very curious too. I know I've seen some comments coming in, where people are on their AI ML journey. Are you a beginner? Are you advanced? That also, it can really define which use cases you want. So I mentioned though, Kathleen, like data is really important. That's what Intersystems is all about. So I'm just curious, on the way that Intersystems considers how data quality affects your decision making within care. I know I saw you wrote a blog post on this. Do you mind sharing a little bit more about how Intersystems addresses this?
Yeah, well, I look at it from several standpoints. One is, are you getting data from enough places? If you look at the healthcare environment, we have this incredibly complex ecosystem. Patients are seen by physicians, they're seen by physical therapists. If you've got a child, the school nurse is involved. You've got social service agencies, you've got hospitals, and with the new consumer-centric models of care where you may be going to a local pharmacy, you may be getting care from a virtual care provider. We have just an incredibly fragmented health ecosystem. And so what we look at is that need to bring that data together from across that ecosystem, which is where interoperability comes into play. You need data standards so that the source and the recipient can understand data the same way. We need to be able to bring in device data. We need to bring in EHR data. We need claims data. You talked about HR data and all those pieces. So first of all, we've got to aggregate the data. We need to make it meaningful. We need to sequence it longitudinally for a patient so you can in fact understand what happened first, what happened second, what was an outcome of care. And we need to normalize that data. So we've got to bring it together. We've got to normalize it so that if you've got multiple providers contributing, are we in fact using the same code sets? Are we documenting the same way? Do we need to bring in NLP, which would be something that I'd be interested in hearing what you have to say on. And then we can serve that up for machine learning. But if all we've got is a piece of the picture, if we're trying to make decisions about how to optimize care for a patient based on hospital data, but most of their care is outside the hospital, if we don't have social determinants of health data, where are they coming from? What kind of work do they do? What's their literacy? Do they have transportation? That's really going to play into all these models.
No, I love that. That was another big topic folks came to the DataRobot booth about was, do you have NLP models? And so we kind of got to walk them through how we handle unstructured data. But I'm of the opinion, you mentioned a bunch of different new inputs coming in, social determinants of health, wearables, even HR data, things that we didn't consider traditionally related to a healthcare model is now feeding into potential predictive models. I think, well, I should say, just feeding into analytics as a whole, I am of the belief that there's so much data that without tools like AI and machine learning, you're just not going to be able to actually harness any insights from that data. The exploratory data analyses that you can do are too broad. And so if you actually want to dig deep, you're going to have to process this data a different way and kind of adopt technology that you haven't before. And that's where I think DataRobot's really well positioned.
I think I've shared this with you, but one of our longtime customers used to tell us, clinicians are coming to us and saying, I'm looking for a needle in a haystack, and you just keep piling on more hay. So I like the idea that we can use traditional analytics, but there's probably more there than we can possibly process. That the human mind can really take into account anywhere from 3 to 7 data points in a decision. with genomics, we're growing that exponentially, and we're dealing with thousands of data points. So if we can leverage what you're working with to begin to surface the things that really matter, the things that are going to make a difference in the decision I make for the patient in front of me, or the population cohort I'm planning for, or the staff member who's sitting in front of my desk right now looking really unhappy, that's going to make a huge difference.
Yeah. We had a question come in. Is there any difference between healthcare staffing from regular staffing? And if so, what are those nuances? So, Kathleen, I'll take a first stab at that. I would say overall, there's obviously a lot of similarities. So when our clients are building churn models, a lot of the variables that are going into their different churn models are going to be similar. When it comes to healthcare, though, there is a shortage of overall workers. So that also impacts our ability to build really great models. It also, these are highly trained individuals, and they typically work different schedules, different hours than normal kind of regular staffing populations. It is not uncommon for people to do 12-hour shifts 3 days a week. I've seen that as a common model. You also can see folks on call, which is another piece, a component that's not traditionally seen in the regular workforce. So those things definitely impact how you would want to build a machine learning model, but the overall core variables probably remain the same. What do you think, Kathleen?
I would agree. I would add to it, healthcare is a highly regulated industry. It's also very different depending on where you are in the world. But one of the things you have to do is make sure you have the right proportion of nurses to patients. You need to make sure you have the right proportion of RNs to licensed practical nurses. You need to look at specialists and hospitalists and what's the right skill mix. Are you meeting the regulatory requirements? Are those people credentialed? Are they getting the hours they need? If you're looking at a surgeon, they need to have done a certain number of procedures per year to keep their skill set up to be considered best quality. So there's a lot of nuances related to that. And then depending on where you are in the world, those regulations are going to be different. And so building a one size model isn't going to work for everybody.
Yeah, generally we're actually building some solution accelerators right now at DataRobot. And the idea here is like having the ability to kind of lift and shift different models from across different industries, and churn and staffing is going to be one of those solution accelerators that we're zooming in on. So the goal hopefully is to have a structure that kind of goes across industries, but that you can tailor specifically to the kind of factors that you see, the differing factors that you see specific to healthcare.
So is an accelerator essentially an out-of-the-box black box that I've got to learn to trust, or how do you work through that issue?
Yeah, so definitely not a black box. DataRobot does not believe in black box models. That's one of our major differentiators, is that we think every model needs to have trust and explainability built in. And that explainability piece is not just explainable from one data scientist to another. It needs to be explainable to the people that are using the model and building the model, even if they're not, PhD level statisticians. So yeah, the solution accelerators, the idea is to be able to have models that are out of the box, but be able to explain every factor of that model. So you can actually just kind of hit the ground running, open up DataRobot, drag and drop your data in, copy over the code, and press start, our lovely start button. And then we'll do the rest. But again, like always with trust and explainability in mind. Especially I see this, and I'm curious what your thoughts are, Kathleen, if folks don't trust the model that you're building, especially within healthcare, if a clinician is asked to utilize a model, if they can't understand what's happening in that model, they're not going to use it. Have you seen that?
Yeah. And in fact, I've been in this space more years than I like to admit. And it goes back to very early models of severity of illness. If you're ranking highly trained professionals around how they're treating a patient versus how their peer is treating a patient, you always used to get the response of, my patients are sicker. So you've got to be able to say, yes, this is valid. You're dealing with people who really know their jobs. Many of them have gone to school for a couple of decades. They really know what they're doing. So they don't want a black box, and they need to know that they can trust it. But the other thing that we're told, and we talk to customers all the time, is we've spent millions of dollars on technology. We've spent an inordinate amount of time putting together a machine learning model. We're all ready to launch it, and people say, that's another step. That's out of my workflow. That I have to go to something else. And so it would have to be so fabulous beyond belief for them to bother getting out of that workflow and going to another tool or going to look something up or grabbing something, that they're just not going to do it. So
Yeah.
it's both trust and usability.
Yeah, I mean, that comes back to one of the reasons why DataRobot believes in partnerships, and we try to play nice with others. We want to make sure that we are able to kind of meet our clients where they are and that they're able to easily build and deploy models. Otherwise, if you have to do 20 extra steps to get to that point, it's just a headache. And kind of as we addressed, there's so much data out there. Like I can just keep exploring that data forever, and not necessarily make the progress that I want. So we think it's really important here that we do have partnerships like our partnership with Intersystems, in order to really get the most value out of that data and just make the overall process much easier to operationalize your use cases in. So I see too, we're almost out of time. I always lose track of time on these things. So I'm curious from your perspective, why are you partnering with DataRobot? Why is the partnerships with DataRobot important for Intersystems?
Well, it's important because, as you point out, we can't do it all. We have customers all around the world dealing with vast amounts of data. They want to get more value from it. Healthcare has a whole lot that's broken, and we're looking for any way we can help our customers leverage their data more effectively to fix what's broken in healthcare, to improve what we're doing to get better outcomes, and frankly, to find the next great discovery. And we think that by working with you and basically accelerating the work we're doing, that you're going to help our customers accelerate their work. So we're excited about it.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathleen. All right, where can people find you? Can they find you on LinkedIn? If they want to follow up with you, what's the best way?
I'm on LinkedIn and would love to talk to you. So.
Awesome. I'm on LinkedIn as well, and my email is very easy. It's just sally@datarobot.com. So feel free to reach out. Yeah, I stole the first name one.
I'm Kathleen Aller at Intersystems.com. So
awesome. All right. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me today.
Thank you.
All right.